You are lying on your back under a coarse wool blanket that smells of lanolin and old wood smoke, though there is no fire this morning. Under the blanket, your body rests on a thin pallet of straw that has been pressed flat by a night of sleep, the stalks now poking through the fabric cover in a few places and digging gently into your shoulder and hip. The straw has absorbed moisture from the ground and the air, so it gives off a sweet, earthy scent of damp hay mixed with the heavier smell of wet soil. Around you, inside the small space, the air is cold and still, holding the odors of worn leather, old sweat, and the faint metallic tang of bronze. You breathe slowly through your nose, and the air feels cool in your nostrils. The tent is one part of a larger shelter shared by 8 men of your contubernium, the small unit of legionaries who eat and sleep and march together. The panels are buttoned together with leather toggles, and the seams between them glow faintly with the grey light of a very early, overcast dawn. That light is so weak that you can barely make out the shapes of your companions, still motionless in their own blankets. One of them shifts in his sleep, his wool cover rustling against the straw, a sound like a dry leaf blown across stone. Another man clears his throat softly, a brief, muffled noise, and then silence returns except for the rain. You lie still for a while longer. There is no call to rise yet, no trumpet or shouted order. The camp around you is slowly stirring on its own, a gradual accumulation of small sounds that bleed into your awareness without urgency. Somewhere to your left, beyond the tent wall, you hear the creak of a wooden pack frame as someone outside adjusts his gear. Farther off, a bronze pot clinks against a stone, and then you hear the splash of water being poured out of it, emptied onto the muddy ground with a soft, liquid thud. A low murmur of voices, no words you can catch, rises and fades like wind through pine boughs. Your face feels cool where the damp air touches your skin. The blanket has slipped down a little during the night, exposing your neck and one shoulder to the chill. You turn your head slightly on the straw and feel the rough texture of the wool blanket against your chin. The skin of your hands, resting on your stomach, is dry and a little stiff from the cold. You flex your fingers slowly, one at a time, feeling the joints move, and then you let them relax again. The blanket is heavy but not thick. Its weight is a familiar comfort, and for a moment you consider staying under it for a little longer. But the grey light is growing a shade brighter, and your body knows it is time to move. You push the blanket down to your waist with a slow, deliberate motion, the wool dragging across your tunic. The chill air reaches your chest and arms immediately, raising tiny bumps on your skin. You sit up, the straw crackling beneath you, and a draft of cold air slides along the small of your back where your tunic has ridden up. You rub your eyes with the heels of your hands, pressing gently until you see soft yellow shapes behind your eyelids. Then you blink and let your hands fall into your lap, staring at the stitching on the tent panel ahead, a long line of neat, tight stitches that hold 2 panels together. Water has beaded on the leather from the inside, not leaking through but condensing from the breath and body heat of 8 sleeping men. The beads catch the grey light and gleam faintly. Your tunic is still slightly damp from the day before, the linen never fully drying in this weather. You reach for it where it lies bundled near your sleeping spot, a crumpled shape of off-white cloth that is cold to the touch. You shake it out once, a quiet flap, and then pull it over your head, guiding your arms through the short sleeves. The linen settles on your shoulders and falls to your thighs, and you can feel the weight of it change as it absorbs the warmth of your skin. The dampness is only a faint coolness now, nothing uncomfortable, just a reminder that everything here is a little wet and will be wet for days. You reach down to your collegiae, the open-work sandals that lie on the straw near your feet. The leather straps are darkened by water, and the hobnails on the soles are cold to the touch. You pick up the left sandal and place your foot inside, working the thick leather sole under your heel. The straps, cut from a single piece of hide, wrap around your ankle and cross over your instep, and you begin to lace them with slow, practiced movements. Your fingers take the wet leather lacings and pull them through the eyelets one by one, snug but not tight, crossing over the bridge of your foot, winding around your calf, tying the final knot with a loop that leaves a short hanging end. The leather is slippery from rain and stiff from old sweat, and you have to pull each lacing twice to get it seated right. You do the same with the right sandal, the motions identical but never feeling hurried. Your hands know the pattern so well that your mind can drift while they work. As you finish the second knot, you hear another sound from outside, the distinct scrape of a wooden shovel biting into wet earth. The dig, short and shallow, probably cutting a small drainage trench to carry away pooling water. The scrape comes twice, then is followed by the wet slap of a clod of mud being tossed aside. The sound of rain continues over everything, linking all these small noises into a single long breath of the morning. Still sitting, you look around the tent. The other men are stirring now. On your right, a soldier props himself up on one elbow and stares at the tent wall with an expression of deep, slow waking. His hair is flattened on one side and he blinks several times without focus. Another man already has his tunic on and is sitting cross-legged, examining a frayed strap on his pack with a quiet patience that suggests he has been awake for a while, but saw no reason to move faster. The man nearest the tent flap pushes it open a hand's width, letting in a thin blade of grey light and a stronger smell of wet pine, before closing it again with a small grunt. No one speaks. Words are not needed yet. You turn your attention to your own gear. Your pack lies at the foot of your pallet, a bulky shape wrapped in a leather cover. Beside it, your helmet rests upside down on the straw, a bowl of bronze with a small pool of condensation collected inside. You pick up the helmet and pour the water out onto the ground. A tiny splash you barely hear over the rain, and then wipe the interior with a corner of your blanket. The metal is cold and smooth, and the cheek pieces, hinged at the sides, swing loosely when you move it. You set it aside again. You will not put it on until you are ready to leave the tent. The slow process of gathering yourself continues. You find your belt, a strip of leather with a bronze buckle, coiled in a neat loop near your pillow. You uncoil it and wrap it around your waist, feeding the end through the buckle and pulling it to the right notch, a familiar fit that settles just above your hips. From the belt hangs a small pouch of soft leather containing a few dry figs, a little salt wrapped in cloth, and a bone comb. You open the pouch out of habit, touching each item to make sure it is there, then tie it shut again. The comb's teeth are smooth from use, and you feel them with your thumb before tucking it away. The rain changes its rhythm slightly as you sit there. For a minute it falls harder, the drumming on the tent roof growing from a soft patter to a brisk, insistent beat that fills your ears and makes the walls shake a little. Then it eases back to a steady drizzle, as if it has taken a breath and settled into a more comfortable pace. Droplets roll off the tent flap in long silver threads, each one catching the morning light for a tiny instant before falling to the mud. You slide your feet under you and move to a kneeling position, the straw bending with a series of dry crunches. You reach for your sargum, the heavy wool cloak that serves as both coat and blanket. It is folded into a rectangle beside your pack, the dark red wool looking almost brown in the dim light. You unfold it slowly, one fold at a time, shaking out a few pieces of straw that cling to the fibers. The cloak is damp along the bottom edge, where it touched the ground overnight, but the rest is dry enough to wrap around your shoulders. You drape it over your back, pulling one end across your chest, and tucking it under your left arm so it stays in place. The wool instantly blotting out the chill on your skin and surrounding you with a faint animal smell. Your body settles into this warmth for a moment. You close your eyes and just listen to the rain, letting the sound wash over you without thought. The tent smells of damp wool and earth, and the steady breath of the other men. Somewhere a man yawns, a long, slow exhale that ends with a soft click of his jaw. The light at the seams of the tent has grown just a little brighter, enough to see the faces of the others now, all of them calm, none of them in a rush. Outside, the sound of water dripping from 1,000 pine needles is a constant, gentle shushing that blends with the rain into a single, uninterrupted blanket of white noise. After a while, you open your eyes and begin the last task of the morning inside the tent, rolling your bedding. You pull the coarse wool blanket off the straw and shake it out, folding it once lengthwise and then rolling it tightly from one end. Your hands pressing down to squeeze out the air and make the bundle as compact as possible. The wool resists a little, springy and thick, but you work it steadily until you have a short cylinder that you bind with 2 leather ties, cinching each one with a simple knot that holds fast. The straw pallet you leave as it is. Another section of the tent group will pack it later, or it will be abandoned for the next unit to use. a thin mattress left on the forest floor to slowly rot back into the earth. You place the rolled blanket near your pack and take a final look around your small area. A stray piece of leather lacing, a tiny iron pin, a scrap of cloth. You gather these small things and tuck them into the pouch on your belt. The habit is automatic, born of years of routine where losing a simple item could mean discomfort later. You do not worry about these things, you simply notice them and put them away. The man nearest the tent flap pushes it open again, this time holding it aside so the grey light floods in properly. The view outside is of mud churned by many feet, puddles the color of strong tea, and a line of trees standing dark and wet against a sky the color of old ash. The rain drifts down through the clearing in fine, misty strands that sway slightly in a breeze, too soft to feel. 3 or 4 legionaries are already outside, moving slowly among the piles of shields and fursae, their silhouettes dark against the wet ground. One of them looks up at the sky, though there is nothing to see but clouds. Another bends to pick up a wooden bucket, tipping it over to empty collected rainwater. The splash is quick, and then the bucket is placed upright again, ready to fill once more. You take your cue from the open flap and begin to gather the last of your things. Your helmet you pick up and tuck under your left arm, the bronze cold even through your sleeve. Your shield, bundled in its leather cover shaped like a long pillow, leans against the tent pole behind you. You touch it, but decide to leave it for now, as you will strap it to your pack after you have stepped outside and found your carrying pole. The tent panel that is yours to carry is already unhooked from the others, its toggles loosened earlier in the dark by feel. You roll it into a neat cylinder that smells of goat and resin and tie it with a spare leather cord. Now you crawl forward, your knees pressing into the muddy ground just outside the tent, and then you stand up into the full rain. The drops are small and light against your face, barely more than a mist that wets your cheeks and forehead without dripping. You feel the cool touch of a droplet on your eyelash, and you blink it away. The air is filled with the sound of rain falling everywhere, on the tents, on the puddles, on the leaves of the undergrowth, on the dark bark of the pines, a sound so steady and complete that it becomes a kind of silence itself. You straighten your sagum, pulling the hood up over your hair to keep the worst of the wet from your scalp, and then you take your first steps into the day. The mud sucks softly at your colleague, a gentle, persistent grip that releases with a small squelch each time you lift your foot. You walk a few paces, then stop beside a stacked pile of furcae, the forked carrying poles that every legionary uses on the march. The wood is dark with moisture, the bark stripped in long smooth strips, and the fork at the top is polished from countless miles of weight. You rest your hand on one, feeling the rain-slick grain, and wait with no impatience for the rest of the tent party to emerge and begin loading their gear. The forest beyond the clearing is a wall of deep green and brown, blurred at the edges by the steady drizzle. Somewhere a crow calls once, the sound raw and far away, and then the rain muffles it back into nothing. You stand there breathing slowly while the water continues to fall in its same unchanging rhythm, and you are simply present, one soldier among many, at the quiet start of an ordinary day. You kneel on the damp ground just inside the tent opening, your knees pressing into the same old straw that crackles softly under your weight. The rain outside continues its steady hush, and every few moments a drop rolls from the leather edge of the tent flap and lands in the mud with a small dull sound that is almost lost in the wider noise. The grey light from the open flap falls across the gear still scattered around your sleeping spot, painting everything in pale faded tones. The folded sagum, the rolled blanket, the bronze helmet turned upside down, the small leather pouch, and the long wooden furca leaning against the central tent pole. You are in no hurry. Packing the kit is a slow, careful process, and your hands know the sequence so well that your mind can drift while you work, lulled by the rhythm of the rain. You pick up the heavy wool cloak first, the sagum still warm from your shoulders. You let it fall open into a large rectangle of dark, coarse fabric that smells of wet sheep. The outer side is beaded with tiny water droplets from your brief step outside, and the inner side is dry and prickly against your palms. You lay it flat on the straw and smooth out the wrinkles with the side of your hand, working from the center outward in slow strokes. Then you fold it in half lengthwise, bringing one long edge over to meet the other, the two halves aligning with a soft whisper of wool against wool, and you press the crease flat with your fingers. You fold it again, this time into thirds, until you have a dense, compact rectangle roughly the width of your two hands spread wide. The edges are neat, and you tuck in a stray corner of the fabric that tries to poke out. The folded cloak will sit directly against your shoulder when you march, cushioning the weight of the furka, so you make the fold smooth and even. You set it aside your right knee, and a few bits of straw cling to the wool. You brush them away with a lazy flick. Next you reach for the rolled blanket, the cylinder of coarse wool bound with two leather ties. You pick it up and find the first tie, a thin strip of hide that has been softened by rain and sweat until it is floppy and easy to work. You pull the knot loose with a pinch of your thumb and forefinger, the leather making a faint squeak as the loop slips free, then unwind the tie and let it hang loose. The second tie comes off in the same way, and you set both aside, placing them carefully in a straight line on a dry patch of straw so they will not get lost. The blanket unfurls slightly when the pressure is released, a slow, unrolling movement that you control by laying it flat on the ground, one hand pressing it open while the other smooths the fabric. You inspect the blanket for a moment, touching a worn patch where the wool has thinned to a gauzy web, but it will hold for another season. Satisfied, you begin to re-roll it, but this time you tuck your bronze razor, a small folding knife, and a spare strip of linen cloth inside the center, burying them in the tight spiral so they will not shift during the day. You roll the blanket from one end, keeping the tension even, your palms sliding along the growing cylinder with a steady pressure that squeezes out the air. When it is as tight as you can make it, you pick up the first leather tie and wrap it twice around the roll, cinching it with a simple loop knot that pulls snug against the wool. Then repeat with the second tie, a hand's width from the other end. The completed roll is firm and solid, no longer a blanket, but a neat parcel that will ride securely on your pack. The tent panel that you are responsible for carrying is still partially attached to the main structure by its upper toggles, and you shuffle on your knees to reach it. The leather is dark brown, almost black near the seams where water is soaked in the most, and it carries the sharp, musky scent of the goat from which it came, a smell that has never fully faded even after many months of use. You work the first toggle free with a gentle twist, the wooden peg sliding out of its loop with a wet, sticky sound as the leather releases its grip. The panel sags a little, and you catch it before it can flop into the mud. The second toggle comes loose more easily, and then you are holding a large, heavy sheet of hide that drips water onto your knees. You spread the panel on the ground, careful to keep the muddy side down and the inside facing up, and you rub a handful of dry straw over the damp surface to blot away the worst of the moisture. The leather drinks the rubbing with a soft, swishing noise, and the straw darkens instantly under your hand. Then you begin to roll the panel from the bottom edge up, tucking in the sides to keep the roll tight. It forms a thick, slightly uneven cylinder that smells strongly of wet animal and old wood smoke. You secure it with a broad leather strap that has a bronze buckle, threading the strap through and pulling it tight, the ton of the buckle catching in a hole worn oval by years of use. With the large items packed, you turn your attention to the small personal things that live in your satchel. The satchel itself is a simple bag of soft, oiled leather that closes with a drawstring, and it sits on the straw near your helmet, its leather dark and shiny from being handled so often. You open it wide, the mouth gaping like a brown flower, and you look inside even though you already know every item by heart. There is your bronze razor, still tucked inside the blanket now, but you mentally note its absence. There is a comb carved from a single piece of boxwood, its teeth fine and even, the wood polished to a warm golden brown color by the oils of your scalp. You run your thumb across the teeth, feeling the slight resistance and the smooth gaps between them, and then you tuck the comb into a thin leather sleeve that protects the teeth from snapping. The sleeve goes into the satchel with a soft rustle. Next you find your small pouch of salt, a square of linen tied with a bit of string, the salt inside feeling gritty and dry when you pinch the fabric. You have carried this same salt for many weeks, adding a few grains to the evening porridge, and you replace it carefully, setting it in the bottom of the satchel so it will not get crushed. Your wooden spoon is next, a utensil you carved yourself from a piece of beechwood during a long winter in a Gallic camp. The bowl of the spoon is darkened from countless meals, and the handle is worn smooth where your fingers always grip it. You slide it into a narrow pocket along the satchel's inner wall, a pocket made exactly for this spoon. The tin cup, slightly dented on one rim from a drop onto a stone, nests upside down over the end of the spoon handle, a perfect fit. You add a small cloth bundle containing a few dried figs, their shapes lumpy and soft through the fabric, and a tiny whetstone no longer than your little finger for sharpening the razor. The satchel is now full but not heavy, and you pull the drawstring closed with a slow, steady tug, the leather puckering inward until the bag is shut tight. Outside the tent, the rain has shifted slightly in intensity. It comes now in long, sweeping sheets that you can hear approaching, a low rustle that grows louder until it sweeps over the leather roof with a fierce, rattling burst, then fades again. During the lulls, you can hear the other legionaries moving around the camp, the clink of metal, the soft thuds of packs being dropped onto the ground, the splash of footsteps in puddles. One man coughs, a short, dry sound, and another man answers with a quiet laugh that is swallowed by the rain. You pause for a moment and listen, your hands resting on your thighs. The rhythm of the camp is unhurried, a collective, slow-motion dance that you are a part of. You feel the cold, damp air on your face and the tiredness in your shoulders from a night on the thin pallet, but these feelings are just background sensations, nothing to be concerned about. Your helmet still sits upside down near your left knee, the interior now dry, but the bronze exterior still filmed with water. You pick it up and look inside, checking the leather liner that cushions your head. A simple band of padded hide with a drawstring that adjusts the fit. The liner is damp from the night's condensation but not rotting, and you run a finger around the stitches to make sure they are all holding firm. The hinged cheek pieces swing freely, and you close them together with a light click before wrapping the helmet in a piece of oiled cloth to keep the metal from rubbing against other gear during the march. The wrapped bundle goes into a dedicated pouch on the side of your pack, a pouch that always smells faintly of brass and old sweat. Now you turn to the furka, the forked carrying pole that will bear all this weight on your shoulder. It stands leaning against the tent pole, a length of ash wood about as tall as you are, with a natural fork at the top formed by cutting a small branch and splitting it. The wood is dark grey from exposure, its bark stripped away long ago, and the surface is slick with rain. You take hold of it and bring it horizontally across your knees, feeling the cool, wet wood against your palms. One end of the furka has a small iron spike, now rust-spotted, for sticking into the ground when you set up camp. The other end is simply a smooth, rounded cut. You check the fork, running your fingers into the V-shaped crotch where the two tines rise, and you find no cracks. The leather straps that will hold your pack in place are attached just below the fork, two long strips with buckles. You test the buckles by pulling on them. The bronze tongues click firmly into their holes. Everything is sound. You begin to load the furka. You bring your pack, a large rectangular satchel of heavy goat leather with a flap that buckles shut, and you set it on the straw in front of you. The pack already contains your spare tunic, a small clay oil lamp, a flint and steel wrapped in oiled cloth, and a drawstring bag of hardtack biscuits that clink softly when you move them. You place the rolled blanket on top of the pack, followed by the folded sargum, and then you fasten the leather straps of the furka over the whole bundle, threading them under the pack and pulling tight. The straps creak as you tension them, the wet leather stretching slightly and gripping the gear with a firm hold. You shake the furka gently, and nothing shifts. The tent panel roll you strap lengthwise along one side of the pack, its bulk fitting neatly into the hollow between the pack and the fork. Your shield, still in its leather cover shaped like a long, curved pillow, you attach to the other side using short lengths of rope that tie through the shield's handle holes, the knots simple and sturdy. The shield is heavy, its wooden core and iron boss adding a significant weight to the assembly. But you have carried it for so long that the pain it causes is just a familiar ache that you no longer notice. The satchel of small items you slip over your head and across your body, the strap running from your right shoulder to your left hip so that the bag rests against your lower back. You adjust the strap length by pulling on a brass slider, letting it out a little to accommodate the bulk of your sagum underneath, and the bag settles into a comfortable spot where it will not swing too much as you walk. Your water flask, a leather bottle sealed with beeswax and clay, hangs from a separate hook on your belt. You fill it later at the stream, but for now it is empty and light, tapping softly against your hip when you move. The last piece of equipment is your helmet, the wrapped bundle already tucked into its pouch, and you double-check the flap that covers it, pressing the leather down so rain cannot seep in. Then you sit back on your heels and survey the loaded furka. The pole lies on the ground, with all your possessions attached to it, looking like a strange, lumpy animal. The arrangement is balanced, the pack and shield on either side, the blanket and cloak on top, the tent panel snug against the fork. It will ride comfortably on your left shoulder once you lift it, the familiar pressure falling on the muscle there. In a spot that has been toughened by hundreds of miles of marching, the rain continues to tap on the tent roof, a sound that has become so constant that it is like a second presence in the space, a quiet companion. You take a moment to sweep the straw away from your area with a few broad sweeps of your hand, pushing the loose stalks into a small pile near the tent wall, leaving the ground bare and smooth for the next occupant. If anyone ever uses this spot again, a small bronze pin, no longer than a finger joint, gleams in the sweepings. You pick it up and add it to the salt pouch, a tiny spare for mending a strap later. The ground where your pallet had been is dark with moisture and slightly warmer than the surrounding earth, the last trace of your body heat still lingering in the soil. You hear the man nearest you finish packing his own kit. He grunts softly as he lifts his furka, and then his footsteps squelch away into the rain. Another man is still inside the tent, methodically folding his cloak in the dim light, his breathing slow and even. No one speaks, but there is a sense of shared rhythm, a quiet understanding that everyone is doing the same thing at their own pace. You decide it is time to join the others. You shift your weight, place one hand on the tent pole for support, and push yourself up from your knees to a standing crouch, your head brushing the damp leather ceiling. The loaded furka is heavy, but you lift it with both hands, bending your knees and straightening them in a single smooth motion, the pole rising with you. You duck out of the tent into the open air, the rain immediately kissing your face and the back of your neck with a cold, gentle touch. You stand up fully outside, the furka resting on the ground for a moment as you adjust your grip, the mud already squishing under your colleague. The world is a wash of grey. Grey sky, grey trees, grey puddles reflecting grey light. Other legionaries are scattered around the clearing, some still crouching by their tents, others already grouped in loose clusters near the track that leads into the forest. The sound of rain on bare heads and on leather and on churned mud is all-encompassing, a low, continuous shushing that fills your ears and makes everything feel distant. You settle the sagum on your shoulders, pulling the hood forward to shield your face, though the rain is so fine that it is barely more than a mist. Then you bend again, lift the furka with a practice swing, and set the shaft onto your left shoulder, feeling the weight settle into the familiar groove. The pack presses against your back, the shield bumps your right arm lightly, and the water drips off the tent panel roll in a tiny steady stream that runs down your leg and into your sandal. You take a step forward, then another, your boots squelching in the mud, and you move slowly toward the track to wait for the order to move. The rain does not stop, and the day ahead stretches out like a long grey corridor through the trees, promising nothing but the same quiet, the same wet march, the same slow rhythm of feet on a muddy road. The rain opens around you like a second sky the moment you duck out from under the tent flap and stand upright on the churned ground. It is a fine, steady mist now, so light that it barely strikes your skin, hanging in the air as much as it falls, filling the clearing with a soft hiss that seems to come from everywhere at once. The light is still grey, a pale, directionless glow that flattens shadows and makes the trunks of the pines and birches look like flat cutouts of dark paper pasted against a lighter background. Water drips from every needle and twig, each drop catching a meager gleam before it falls and vanishes into the mud. You feel the mist settle on your cheeks and on the backs of your hands, a cold, fine layer that tightens your skin, but does not soak. You shift the furka on your left shoulder, the weight already pressing into the muscle there, and you take a slow breath of air that smells of wet earth, wet leather, and the clean, sharp scent of pine resin washed from the branches. Around you, the camp is dissolving into its marching components with the quiet order of long practice. Men move among the leather tents, their cloaks dark and their heads bare or covered with hoods, and each one is engaged in the same slow ritual of final packing. A soldier near the latrine trench, a narrow cut in the earth marked by freshly piled soil, is rolling his tent panel with long, patient strokes of his arms, his knee pressing the leather flat. Another man sits on an upturned bucket, fitting a spare sandal strap to his pack, his fingers working the wet leather with small, precise tugs. The mud underfoot is a brown paste that has been trampled into a texture like thick porridge, and every boot leaves a deep, squelching print that immediately fills with water. The grass that might once have grown here is long gone, replaced by bare earth and scattered patches of torn moss. You notice a few small puddles the color of strong tea, their surfaces puckered by the falling mist, and you step around them without thinking, your caligae squelching at every other stride. You walk toward the shallow defensive trench that marks the edge of the small marching camp, a V-shaped cut in the soil that runs in a straight line from the western corner to the eastern corner, no more than knee-deep and a pace wide. The trench is half filled with water from the night's rain, the surface smooth and brown, reflecting the grey sky in a dull mirror. A thin line of piled earth rises behind it, topped with a few scattered pine cones that fell during the night, their scales closed tight against the wet. You stop near the trench and lower your furka to the ground, resting its butt in the mud so you can straighten your shoulders for a moment. The trench isn't much of a barrier. It is a symbol of discipline, dug every night regardless of the weather, a habit that no one questions. You look across the trench at the dark wall of forest beyond, and you see water dripping steadily from the lower branches, a thin curtain of drops that catches the grey light and glints like tiny glass beads. The men are beginning to gather on the open ground between the tents and the trench, forming a loose assembly that will soon become the marching column. There is no trumpet, no shouted command. The centurion simply appears from the direction of his own, slightly larger tent, a sturdy man in a red sagum faded to the color of dried brick, his bronze helmet with a transverse crest of horsehair that droops with moisture. He carries a vinewood staff in his right hand, a slender, polished stick no longer than his arm, and he taps it gently against his own kalida as he walks, not to hurry anyone, but as if keeping time with some private rhythm. You watch him move along the edge of the gathering men, his pace unhurried, his eyes passing over each soldier with a calm, practiced gaze that misses nothing. He does not call names or give orders yet. He simply observes, the vine stick occasionally rising to point at a loose strap or an improperly tied bundle, and the soldier silently adjusts whatever was noted without a word being exchanged. You take your place in the assembly, finding the spot that belongs to your concubinium in the column, the 8th position in the 3rd line of the century, a place you have stood in so many times that your feet find it automatically. The man in front of you is a tall, broad-shouldered legionary from the lowlands of northern Italy, his pack tilted slightly to the right because of a broken strap he has never replaced, and the man behind you is a wiry, quiet fellow from a village in southern Gaul, his furka held across both shoulders in a way that makes him look hunched. You greet neither of them with words, only with a slight nod as they fall into place, and they return the gesture with the same wordless acknowledgement. To your left, another sentry is forming in the mist, their shapes blurred by the rain, their fursi making a sparse forest of vertical poles that sway gently as the men shift their weight. You settle your own furka across your left shoulder again, the familiar weight settling into the groove that has been worn into your muscle and bone over years of marching. The pack presses against your back with a solid, steady pressure, the rolled tent panel on one side and the shield on the other, and you feel the slight sway of the loaded pole as you adjust your stance. Your bronze helmet is still wrapped in its oiled cloth on the pack. You will not put it on until just before the march begins, to keep the inside as dry as possible. For now your head is bare except for the hood of your sagum, and rainwater trickles slowly down your forehead from the edge of the fabric, a cool, thin line that you wipe away with one finger, then another, the motion slow and automatic. The assembly continues to fill in around you without haste. A soldier near the front of the line is still tightening the laces of his caligae, kneeling in the mud, while his neighbor holds his furka for him. 2 men from a different tent group are sharing the last of a dry biscuit, breaking it between them with a quiet crunch that carries surprisingly far in the damp air. The centurion has stopped near the trench and is now speaking softly with the optio, his second-in-command, a man who carries a wax tablet and a stylus for tallying the men. The optio nods, makes a small mark on the tablet, and then walks slowly down the line, counting heads with a quiet murmur of numbers you cannot quite hear. His passing is marked by a small ripple of movement as men straighten their packs and face forward, though he says nothing to hurry them. You watch him approach, a stocky man with a calm face and mud-spattered sandals, and when his eyes meet yours, you give a slight nod. He marks something on his tablet and moves on. The forest around the clearing seems to press inward as you wait, the trees a solid wall of wet bark and dripping needles. The birches, pale and smooth, stand out against the darker pines, their white trunks almost glowing in the grey light. Moss covers the lower parts of the trunks and the roots, thick cushions of deep green that hold the rain like sponges, and water runs down the bark in slow, twisting rivulets that branch and merge and branch again. The undergrowth is a tangle of wet ferns, their fronds bowed down by the weight of the water, and spiky clumps of dark green shrubbery that you do not know the name of. Far above, the tops of the tallest pines are lost in the low mist, their shapes fading into the cloud, and a light wind moves through them with a soundless, ghostly motion, the treetops barely swaying, but the mist swirling in slow eddies around the highest branches. You look up at that grey ceiling for a moment, feeling the mist on your face, and then you lower your eyes to the muddy ground again. The weight of your pack is a constant, dull pressure on your shoulder, not painful, but insistent, a reminder of the long day ahead. You shift the furka slightly, moving it a finger's width along the groove in your shoulder, and the new position brings a brief relief before the pressure settles back in. The leather straps of the furka creak when you move, a soft, wet sound that blends with the rain and the murmur of voices. Your water flask, empty for now, taps against your hip with each shift of your weight, a hollow, wooden sound like a pebble dropped into a dry well. You reach down and still it with your hand, then let it hang motionless. The waiting has a rhythm of its own, a slow, patient quality that you are well accustomed to. You let your gaze drift across the assembly, taking in the small details without any need to remember them. The man in front of you has a tear in the back of his sagum, a long, jagged rip that has been stitched shut with uneven, clumsy thread, and the stitching has pulled the fabric together in a puckered seam that collects water. The man behind you is using a small whetstone to sharpen his dagger, the rhythmic scrape of stone on iron whispering under the rain, a sound so faint that you can only hear it when the wind briefly drops. Farther down the line, a soldier has removed his helmet and is wiping the inside with a bit of cloth, his hair pressed flat against his skull in a dark, wet plaster. Another man is adjusting the rope that holds his cooking pot to his pack, tying and retying the knot with a placid, methodical patience. The centurion finishes his talk with the optio and begins a slow walk along the front of the assembly, his vine stick tapping a soft, wet rhythm on his own boot. As he passes, the last quiet conversations fade out, and men straighten their shoulders and faces forward, though there is no tension in the air, only a calm readiness. He stops in front of a soldier who has let his shield cover slip, and without a word, he points the stick at the loose flap. The soldier glances down, sees the issue, and quickly reties the knot. The centurion watches for a moment, nods, and moves on. You check your own shield cover out of habit, your fingers finding the rope knots that hold it to your pack, and they are all firm, the leather wrap snug and smooth. The rain continues its steady, whispering fall, now slightly heavier than before, a soft, persistent drizzle that begins to soak through the outer layer of your sagum in a few places. The wool darkens where the water collects, and you feel the dampness slowly spreading across your shoulders, a cool weight that is not uncomfortable yet. The hood has begun to stick to your hair, and you push it back a little to let the air reach your neck, the mist immediately prickling your skin. Around you, other men are doing the same small adjustments, tugging hoods, tightening belts, shifting packs, a slow collective fidgeting that is as much about passing the time as about actual comfort. You notice the smell of the camp now more than before, a complex layering of odors that the rain cannot wash away. There is the sharp tang of human sweat, the earthy smell of wet wool and leather, the faint metallic scent of bronze and iron, and underneath it all the clean, cold smell of the forest itself, pine resin and wet moss, and the dark, rich scent of decayed leaves. The mixture is familiar, so familiar that you rarely notice it anymore. But in this quiet moment of waiting it fills your nostrils and grounds you in the present. You breathe it in slowly, letting your shoulders relax under the pack, and you feel a small, quiet sense of order in the midst of the wet, grey morning. The Optio finishes his count and returns to the Centurion, speaking a few words while pointing at his tablet. The Centurion nods, taps his vine stick once against the ground, a single soft thud that many men look up at, and then he gestures westward along the track. That is the signal. There is no shouting, no hurried scramble. The first rank of legionaries, those at the very front of the formation, begin to move, their boots squelching in the mud as they turn and start down the narrow forest path. The movement spreads backward through the column like a gentle wave, each rank beginning to walk a few moments after the one in front of it, the gaps between men opening and closing as the pace is found. You watch the man ahead of you, the tall soldier with the broken strap, as he adjusts his furka one last time and takes his first step. Then it is your turn. You lift your furka a fraction higher, settle it fully into the groove on your shoulder, and take a slow, deliberate step forward into the mud. The ground sucks at your caliga with a wet, grasping sound that you feel more than hear, the mud oozing between the leather straps and squishing against your toes. You lift your other foot and take the next step, and then the next, falling into the rhythm of the march as naturally as breathing. The forest track opens before you, a narrow ribbon of brown water and churned earth that winds between the dark trunks, vanishing into the mist. On either side, the trees stand motionless and indifferent, their branches dripping 1,000 small waterfalls that splash onto your shoulders and your pack. The whole column is moving now, a long grey serpent of men and gear and rain, and you are just one part of it, your footsteps merging with the footsteps of all the others into a single, soft, continuous sound, like the distant murmur of the sea. As you walk past the shallow trench and leave the camp behind, you glance back once, not out of any strong emotion but simply because it is there. The clearing is already emptying, the last few tents collapsed and rolled, the ground a mess of footprints and puddles. A single legionary remains by the latrine ditch, filling it in with a wooden spade, his movements slow and methodical. Soon he too will shoulder his pack and join the tail of the column, and the camp will be nothing but a scar on the forest floor, already filling with rain. You turn your face forward again and focus on the muddy path ahead, the sound of the rain filling your ears, the weight of the pack on your shoulder, and the simple, patient task of putting one foot in front of the other. The column begins to move without a trumpet call or a shouted command, the transition from stillness to motion happening so gradually that you do not notice the exact moment when your feet begin to carry you forward. One moment you are standing beside your furka on the muddy track, the rain misting your face, listening to the low murmur of voices and the endless patter of water on leaves. The next moment the man in front of you has taken a step, and you take a step to match him, and then the whole line is shuffling ahead like a single long animal, stretching itself awake. The forest opens before you, a tunnel of dark trunks and wet undergrowth, and the march begins. Your left foot lifts from the mud with a soft sucking sound as the thick brown soil releases its grip on the hobnails of your caliga. The foot swings forward, gliding just above the churned track, and then descends again, sinking slightly into the wet earth with a dull, squelching thud. Your right foot follows, the same lift and release and press, and then the left again. A slow, unbroken sequence that soon becomes the only clock you need. The mud is not deep yet, only a shallow layer of slick, cold ooze that covers the harder ground beneath, but it is enough to coat the leather straps of your sandals and creep between your toes, bringing a chill that never quite warms. Each step presses a shallow footprint into the track, a brief shake that fills instantly with brown water and then is trampled by the man behind you. The sound of the march is a continuous, rolling squelch, hundreds of feet pressing into wet soil at the same time, lifting in a ragged chorus of wet pops and bloops. It is a noise without a sharp edge, a low organic rhythm that blends with the rain into a single grey drone. The rain itself is a steady drizzle now, not the heavy sheets of earlier, but a fine, pervasive mist that fills the air and beads on every surface. It taps on your helmet with 1,000 tiny metallic ticks, runs down the bronze bowl, and drips from the rim in front of your eyes. One drop at a time, each one a cool silver bead that falls and is gone. The hood of your sargum is soaked through, the wool dark and heavy, and a thin stream of water runs from a fold in the fabric down the back of your neck, tracing a cold line between your shoulder blades. You watch the back of the legionary in front of you, a moving wall of dark wool and leather that blocks the path ahead. His sagum, once red, is now the color of dried blood, almost black with water, and it sways gently with his stride, the hem lifting and falling in a slow, hypnotic wave. His furka, the forked pole, bobs up and down on his shoulder, the tip pointing at the sky and then dipping forward with each step, a rhythm as regular as a pendulum. His pack creaks softly, a sound you can just hear beneath the rain, the leather straps rubbing against wood and iron with every shift of weight. His caligai squelch, his shield bumps against his pack, and a small bronze cup hanging from his belt, taps once, twice, 3 times against his water flask in a tiny, accidental chime. You watch these small movements without thought, your mind latching onto them the way a drifting boat latches onto a slow current. The weight of your own gear settles into your body like a familiar ache. The furka presses down on your left shoulder, the wooden shaft grinding against the muscle there through your sagum and tunic, and you feel the folded cloak beneath it slowly compress until the pressure is spread across a wide, warm band. The pack sways against your lower back with each step, a gentle bump that pushes your hips forward slightly, and the shield on the other side bumps your elbow in a counter rhythm. Your satchel hangs from its crossbody strap, swinging in a small arc that taps your right hip, the solid shape of the tin cup and spoon and salt pouch all shifting together. The strap of the satchel has worn a groove into your sagum, a smooth channel where the wall has been pressed flat and shiny by years of the same weight in the same place. You feel all of this at once, a complex map of pressure and motion, but you do not think about it, you just let it be there, a background sensation as constant as the rain. The track winds through the forest, a narrow ribbon of mud that curves around the trunks of old pines and dips into shallow valleys where the water runs in tiny rivulets across the path. The trees on either side are tall and straight, their bark dark and deeply furrowed, and their branches begin high overhead, forming a canopy that filters the grey light into a dim, greenish twilight. Rain drips from the canopy in fat, irregular drops that fall with a slap when they hit your helmet or the top of your pack. They are heavier than the drizzle, collecting on the needles and leaves until they swell and let go, a slow, patient process that has been happening all morning and will happen all afternoon. You cannot see far into the forest. The undergrowth is a tangle of ferns and moss-covered logs, and the dark shapes of smaller trees, all of it wet and dripping and still. The column moves at a steady pace, not fast and not slow. It is the pace you have walked for years, a speed that eats miles without tiring the legs too quickly, a rhythm that the body slips into the way a boat slips into a current. Your breathing is slow and even, your breath misting faintly in the cool air before it is whisked away by the rain. Your arms hang at your sides or rest on the furka to steady it, and your hands are cold and wet, the knuckles stiff when you flex them. The rain has soaked through the wool of your tunic at the cuffs, and the fabric clings to your wrists, heavy with water. Your legs move with a mechanical steadiness, the muscles of your calves and thighs tightening and releasing in a smooth, endless repetition that you have performed 1,000,000 times before. Ahead, the track slopes down into a shallow depression where a stream has overrun its banks, spreading a wide sheet of brown water across the path. The legionary in front of you splashes into it without breaking stride, his feet sending up small, muddy waves that fold over his ankles and pour back into the puddle. You follow, stepping into the water with a soft splash, feeling the sudden, deeper cold as it floods over your caligai and soaks the hem of your tunic. The water is only ankle deep, but it is cold enough to make you draw a slightly sharper breath, the chill climbing up your calves and settling in your shins. The bottom of the puddle is soft and silty, and your feet sink a little with each step, the mud pulling at your soles before you climb out the other side and resume the regular rhythm on firmer ground. Your sandals now make a wet, sloshing sound with every step, the water trapped between the leather straps and your skin, and the mud on your legs begins to dry in thin, cracking lines. The forest does not change. You pass one pine tree, then another, each one almost identical to the last in its tall, dark shape and its rough, wet bark. The ferns on the forest floor are the same dull green, their fronds drooping under the weight of the rain. A fallen log lies across the undergrowth, its wood soft and black with rot, covered in a carpet of bright moss that steams faintly in the damp air. You notice it as you pass. A brief flicker of green in the corner of your eye, and then it is gone, replaced by more trunks and more ferns. The grey light is unchanging, coming from everywhere and nowhere, as if the sky itself has dissolved into the mist and spread evenly across the world. Your mind begins to drift. The physical sensations of the march become a steady, lulling hum that fills your awareness without requiring attention. The squelch of mud, the tap of rain, the creak of leather, the sway of the pack, all of it blends into a single, quiet state. You notice the small details without attaching thoughts to them, the way a single drop of water hangs from the tip of your nose before falling, the way the wool of your sagum smells of wet sheep, and the faint, distant memory of a campfire, the way your stomach feels hollow and warm, a comfortable emptiness that will not need food for hours yet. A bird calls somewhere in the distance, a thin, reedy whistle that rises and falls and then is gone, swallowed by the rain. The sound of the column is a soft, shuffling presence behind you, the footsteps of 60 other men blending into a low, continuous rustle that echoes slightly off the tree trunks. The track climbs a low rise, the mud becoming shallower here as the ground slopes upward and drains onto the lower path. Your calves feel the change in effort, a slight deepening of the muscles' work that sends a warm ache up the back of your legs. You lean forward just a little, the fur compressing harder into your shoulder, and you shorten your stride to match the incline. The climb is gentle, no more than a slow, steady rise that takes a few hundred heartbeats to complete. And then the ground flattens out again, and you resume the regular pace without having broken rhythm. The rain has lightened further on the higher ground, reduced to a fine mist that barely wets your face, though the trees still drip from their collected burden. The air is cooler here, and you can see a little farther into the forest that there is nothing to see except more trees stretching away into a grey haze. Somewhere behind you, a man coughs, a dry hacking sound that is quickly muffled. Another man adjusts his shield strap, and you hear the clink of a bronze buckle and the soft grunt of effort. No one speaks. The silence of the march is not an empty silence, but a full one, packed with the sounds of rain and footsteps and gear, a silence that has its own texture and weight. Words would feel out of place here, too sharp and sudden for this slow, grey world. You pass a small shrine beside the track, a heap of stones piled around a wooden post carved with the faded image of a forest god, its features worn smooth by years of rain. The post leans slightly to one side, and a few withered flowers placed there by some previous traveller have turned brown and slimy on the stones. You glance at it as you pass, your eyes registering the shape without pausing, and then it is behind you and forgotten. The track continues, and the march continues, and the rain continues. The first mile ends without any sign or marker. There is no milestone, no break in the trees, no change in the road that tells you the distance has been covered. You simply know, in the quiet way that a body knows such things, that a certain amount of time has passed and a certain amount of ground has been crossed. Your legs feel a little heavier now, a deep, dull tiredness that sits in the muscles like a stone settling into mud. The furca seems to have grown slightly harder on your shoulder, the wooden shaft now pressing into a spot that is beginning to ache, and you shift it by a finger's width, rolling the pole a fraction to the left so the weight falls on a fresh patch of muscle. The relief is small and temporary, but it is enough. Your feet are numb with cold and wet, a sensation you no longer notice except as a distant, blunt pressure. The hobnails of your caligae, small iron studs driven into the leather sole, grip the mud with each step, making a faint, gritty sound like salt grinding into a stone. The mud itself has changed consistency as you have moved, from the thin, watery ooze of the low ground to a thicker, stickier clay that clings to your sandals and builds up in a heavy layer on the soles. You stop for a moment, bending to scrape the mud off against a protruding root, the wet clay falling away in a thick, dark slab, and then you straighten and hurry a few steps to catch up with the column, the brief pause having broken your rhythm just enough to feel like a small, sharp interruption. The march resumes its steady flow. You find yourself matching your breathing to your footsteps. A slow, four-step pattern that you fell into without meaning to. Inhale on the left and right. Exhale on the next two, a calm oceanic rhythm that rises and falls like the tide. The rain continues its soft, drumming accompaniment, a sound that has become so familiar that you would miss it if it stopped, though it shows no sign of ever stopping. The forest is a world made of water, each leaf and branch and trunk heavy with it, the air itself thick with the smell of wet earth and wet wood and wet wood. Time stretches into a long grey band without edges. The first mile has passed, but it feels no different from the second mile that is coming, and the second will feel no different from the 10th. You accept this without thought, the way the trees accept the rain, without resistance or complaint. Your body moves forward, your gear creaks and sways, and the mud squelches under your feet in a rhythm that will continue for hours yet. You are a small part of a long, slow column, a legionary on a muddy track in a rainy forest, and nothing more is required of you than to keep walking, to keep breathing, to let the miles wash over you like the rain. The second mile passes without a mark, and the third and the fourth, each one blending into the next until the distance you have walked becomes a single unbroken flow of grey light and wet trees and the steady squelch of mud underfoot. Time on the march does not move in the ordinary way. It spreads out into a long, shallow pool that has no ripples and no edges, measured only by the slow rhythm of your footsteps and the gradual, almost imperceptible changes in the weight of your pack. The forest around you is a world made entirely of vertical lines, dark trunks rising from the wet earth and vanishing into the low mist overhead, and between the trunks there is only more of the same. An endless repetition of pine and birch and the occasional oak, their bark black with moisture and their leaves heavy with collected rain. You walk, and you watch, and you do not think in words. Your eyes pass over the details of the forest floor as you move. A patch of deep green moss spreading over a fallen log, its surface beaded with 1,000 tiny droplets that catch the grey light and hold it like pale pearls. A cluster of pale mushrooms growing from a rotted stump, their caps soft and white and already dissolving into slime from the endless wet. A slick dark patch of mud where a small animal has crossed the track during the night, its footprints now nothing more than shallow dimples filling with brown. You see each of these things for a moment, register them without comment, and then they slide past and are replaced by new versions of the same, moss and mushroom and mud and track, repeating forever. The rain continues its steady, patient work. It has been falling for so long now that you can no longer imagine a world without it, a world where the air is dry and the ground is hard and the leaves do not bend under the weight of water. The drizzle shifts between a fine mist that barely touches your skin and a heavier, more insistent rainfall that patters loudly on your helmet and soaks through the shoulders of your sargum in a slow, cold seep. During the heavier spells, the sound of the rain on the canopy overhead rises to a low roar, a constant shushing that fills your ears and makes the footsteps of the column seem distant and muffled. Then the rain eases back to a mist, and the footsteps return, and the cycle repeats without pattern or warning. The track climbs a low ridge, the ground becoming slightly rockier underfoot. You feel the change through the soles of your caligae, the mud giving way to a firmer surface studded with small, rounded stones that roll under your hobnails and make a gritty, grinding sound. The trees here are thinner, more widely spaced, and the mist is thicker, a soft grey blanket that reduces the visible world to a circle of perhaps 50 paces in any direction. Beyond that circle, the tree trunks fade into pale ghosts, and then into nothing. The column ahead of you dissolves into the mist, and the column behind you emerges from it, so that you seem to be walking in a small, moving island of men and rain, cut off from everything else in the world. You stop thinking about distance entirely. The concept of miles becomes abstract, a number with no meaning. What matters is the rhythm, the slow, steady beat of your footsteps on the track, 4 steps for every breath, 100 breaths for every small change in the landscape. You notice that a particular birch tree has a forked trunk that forms a narrow V, and you watch it approach for a long time, growing from a pale smudge in the mist into a distinct shape, and then passing beside you and fading back into the mist behind, and you think nothing about it except that it was there, and now it is not. Another tree approaches, this one a pine with a long twisted scar running down its bark where lightning struck it years ago. The wound black and deep, and oozing resin that gleams like honey even in the grey light. You pass the scarred pine, and then it is gone, replaced by more unmarked trunks. The weight of your furka has become a part of your body now, a pressure that you no longer distinguish from your own shoulder. The skin under the shaft has probably reddened by now, the flesh compressed and warm, but the sensation has faded into the general background of aches that come with a long march, and you do not bother to shift the pole anymore. Your legs move with a mechanical precision that requires no thought, the muscles contracting and releasing in their ancient pattern, the knees bending and straightening, the ankles flexing with each step. Your hips sway slightly with the motion, a gentle rocking gait that helps you balance the pack and the shield, and your arms swing in a small, natural counter-rhythm, the left hand resting on the furka while the right hangs loose at your side. A small stream crosses the track, its water running clear and cold over a bed of smooth, dark stones. The legionaries ahead of you step carefully across a line of flat rocks that some earlier traveler placed there as a ford, their boots splashing just a little, and you follow them with the same careful steps, your caligay gripping the wet stone with a soft, gritty sound. The water is shallow and fast, and it swirls around the rocks with a quiet, liquid chuckle, the first new sound you have heard in hours, that is not rain or footsteps or the creak of leather. You pause on the far bank for a moment, bending to splash a handful of cold water onto your face, and the shock of it wakes you slightly from the marching trance, the cold tightening your skin and making you blink. Then you straighten and continue walking, the water dripping from your chin and soaking into the collar of your tunic, and within a dozen steps the trance has closed over you again. The forest deepens as the track descends into a shallow valley, the trees growing taller and closer together until their branches interlock overhead in a dense, wet canopy that blocks most of the light. The gloom here is almost twilight, a dim green-brown shadow that makes the mud underfoot look black, and the tree trunks look like dark pillars supporting a low ceiling of needles and leaves. The rain falls more quietly here, caught by the canopy and distributed into a slow, heavy drip that falls in fat, distinct drops, each one landing with a soft, percussive slap on the leaves of the undergrowth or on the helmets and shoulders of the marching men. The air is cooler and still, thick with the smell of wet earth and decaying wood, a rich, heavy scent that fills your lungs and tastes faintly of mushrooms. You pass through a stand of ancient oaks, their trunks massive and gnarled, covered in a thick coat of grey-green lichen that has grown in slow, patient layers over centuries. The roots of the oaks spread out across the forest floor like the knuckles of buried giants, and the track winds between them in a narrow, twisting path that forces the column to slow slightly and bunch together. You can see the faces of the men around you more clearly here, their features emerging from the gloom as they turn to navigate the routes, and you notice the calm, empty expressions on their faces, the same marching trance reflected back at you from a dozen tired eyes. One man nods at you, a slow, wordless acknowledgement that you return without thinking. Then the oaks are behind you, and the track straightens again. A bird sings somewhere in the canopy, a soft, fluting call of 3 descending notes that repeats once and then falls silent. You listen for it to continue, but it does not, and the silence that follows is deeper than before, filled only by the drip of water and the shuffle of boots. The bird call was so clean and clear that it seemed to cut through the greyness like a knife, but now it is gone and you are not entirely sure you heard it at all. You keep walking, and the doubt fades, and the march swallows the memory. Your stomach feels hollow now, a gentle, distant hunger that rumbles faintly when you shift the furka. You have not eaten since the evening before, and your body is beginning to notice the lack of food, though the sensation is not urgent. You know that the midday pause will come eventually, a halt by some stream or open clearing, where the packs will be lowered and the hardtack biscuits will be broken out. But you do not know how far away that pause is, and you do not try to guess. The pause will come when it comes, and until then you will walk. This acceptance is as natural as breathing. The rain thickens slightly, shifting from a mist to a steady, fine drizzle that beads on the wool of your sagum and runs down the folds in tiny rivulets. Your hood has become heavy with water, and you push it back again, letting the rain fall directly on your hair, which is already wet anyway. The cool water runs down your scalp, and behind your ears and down the back of your neck, a sensation that is almost pleasant now, a small, cool relief from the stuffy warmth under the wool. Your hair clings to your forehead in dark, wet strands, and you push it aside with one wet hand, the motion so automatic that you do it without noticing. The column crosses another stream, this one wider and slower, its surface smooth and brown with silt. There are no stepping stones here, and the legionaries ahead of you wade directly through the water, which rises to their calves and soaks the hems of their tunics. You follow, stepping off the muddy bank and into the stream, feeling the cold water flood over your caligae and climb your legs. The current pushes gently against your shins, a soft, steady pressure that makes you plant your feet more carefully, and the stream bed is soft underfoot, a deep layer of fine silt that puffs up in brown clouds around your ankles. You wade through slowly, your feet sinking a little with each step, the water swirling around your knees, and then you climb out the far side, your sandals heavy with water and silt, the leather straps dark and slick. The march continues on the opposite bank without any break in rhythm. The afternoon has arrived without your noticing. There is no way to tell the time in this grey, sunless world, but your body knows that the day has moved past its midpoint. The tiredness in your legs a little deeper now, the hunger in your stomach a little sharper. The light has not changed. Still the same flat grey glow, but something in the quality of the air suggests that the sun, hidden behind all those layers of cloud, has begun its slow descent toward the western hills. You do not think about this in words, you simply feel it. The quiet, internal clock that all long marches develop, a sense of time that is measured not in hours, but in the gradual accumulation of miles and the slow deepening of fatigue. The road levels out and passes through a stretch of younger forest. The trees here thinner and closer together, their trunks no thicker than your thigh, and their branches forming a dense, tangled wall on either side of the track. The undergrowth is thick here, ferns and brambles, and the dark green leaves of some shrub you do not recognize, all of it wet and dripping. Water runs down the track in a shallow, continuous sheet, the mud too saturated to absorb any more, and your footsteps send up small splashes that land on your calves and the back of the man ahead. No one minds. Everyone is equally wet, equally muddy, equally lost in the slow, grey rhythm of the afternoon. You pass the wreck of an old wagon, its wooden frame half buried in the mud beside the track, its wheels rotted and collapsed. The iron fittings are rusted to a dark orange-brown, and moss has grown over the planks, softening the sharp edges. Some long-ago merchant or supply train lost this wagon to the mud and the rain, and now it is just another part of the forest, slowly sinking into the earth, returning to the soil from which its wood came. You glance at it as you pass, your mind barely registering the shape, and then it is behind you, and you have already forgotten it. The endless trees continue, and the drizzle continues, and your footsteps continue, and the whole world is reduced to this single, narrow track through a wet, green wilderness that never changes. You are not tired in any sharp way, not exhausted or pained, just deeply, thoroughly worn, your body running on a low, steady flame that has burned all day and will burn for hours yet. The march has become a kind of sleepwalking, a state where you are aware and moving, but also somehow absent, your mind drifting in a grey, wordless space that is as calm and featureless as the sky. The halt comes without a signal, spreading backward through the column like a river losing its current and settling into a still pond. The man in front of you stops walking, and you stop walking, and the man behind you stops walking, and all along the track the slow, wet shuffle of boots fades into a new kind of quiet, a quiet that still contains the rain, but no longer contains the rhythm of marching feet. You stand still for a moment, your legs still holding the memory of motion, a faint ghostly sensation of forward movement that takes a few heartbeats to fade. The furca seems to grow heavier now that you are not walking, the weight settling more firmly into the groove on your shoulder until you bend your knees and lower the pole to the muddy ground, letting it stand upright like a narrow tree with all your possessions hanging from its fork. The place where the column has stopped is a narrow clearing beside a shallow stream, the water running brown and slow over a bed of smooth stones and fine gravel. The clearing is not large, barely wide enough for the century to spread out along the bank, and the ground here is a little higher and slightly less muddy than the track, covered in a thin layer of pine needles that have turned brown and soft from the rain. Tall pines ring the clearing on three sides, their branches forming a partial roof overhead that lets through less rain than the open track, and the stream forms the fourth boundary, its water murmuring a low liquid song that seems very loud after the hours of squelching mud and dripping trees. You can see the far bank through the mist, a low slope covered in ferns and the dark shapes of fallen logs, and beyond that, more forest stretching away into the grey. You leave your furka standing near a young birch tree, its white bark peeling in thin, papery curls that hang limp and wet, and you walk the few paces to the stream's edge. The bank here is a low shelf of dark soil held together by the roots of a large pine, and you kneel on the root, feeling the rough, wet bark under your knees through the damp wool of your tunic. The water flows past just below you, its surface smooth except where small eddies swirl around the stones, and you can see the bottom clearly. Every pebble and grain of sand magnified slightly by the clear, brown water. A few fallen leaves drift past, carried by the slow current, their edges curled and their colors softened to a brown so dark it is almost black. You uncork your leather water flask, pulling the wooden stopper with a soft, wet pop, and you submerge the flask in the stream, holding it at an angle so the water flows in smoothly, without taking any of the fine silt from the bottom. The flask fills slowly, gurgling as the air escapes, and when it is full, you lift it out and hold it up, the leather dark and heavy with water, a few drops falling from the mouth to land on your knee. You bring the flask to your lips and drink, and the water is cold, so cold that it makes your teeth ache faintly, and it tastes of stone and pine needles and the deep, clean earth of the forest. You drink until the flask is half empty, then lower it and wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, the wet wool of your sleeve dragging across your chin. You sit back from the stream, finding a place on a mossy stone that has been worn smooth by the passage of countless boots over countless years, and you pull your sagum tighter around your shoulders, the wool heavy and damp but still holding a thin layer of your body's warmth. Around you, the other legionaries are doing the same things, kneeling at the stream, filling their flasks, sitting on stones or fallen logs or simply on the wet ground with their backs against the tree trunks. The quiet is deep and calm, broken only by the murmur of the water and the soft rustle of men settling into their rest. A few low voices rise and fall, but no one speaks loudly, and most of the men say nothing at all. You reach into the satchel that hangs across your body and pull out the small cloth bundle that holds your food. The cloth is damp, but inside, the hardtack biscuits are dry, protected by a layer of oiled fabric that you unwrap with slow, careful fingers. The biscuits are pale brown and hard as wood, their surface pitted with small holes and dusted with a fine, gritty flour that clings to your fingertips. You take one out and hold it in your hand, feeling its weight and the rough, unyielding texture of it, and you raise it to your mouth and bite down with your back teeth. The biscuit cracks with a dry, sharp sound, and a few crumbs fall onto your sagum, and you chew slowly, the hard fragments softening as your saliva works into them, releasing a faint, wheaty flavor that is almost sweet. The chewing is a slow, rhythmic process, your jaw moving in a steady circle, and it blends with the sound of the stream and the rain. From the same bundle, you take a strip of dried meat, dark brown and stiff as a piece of old leather, and you tear off a small piece with your fingers, the fibers separating in long, stringy strands. You place the meat in your mouth and chew it together with the hardtack, and the saltiness of the meat mixes with the plain, dry biscuit, and together they become something that is not delicious but deeply satisfying, a simple, honest filling that settles in your stomach and eases the hollow ache. You eat slowly, taking small bites and chewing them completely before taking the next, and the process of eating becomes a meditation, a quiet focus on the taste and texture of the food and the sound of the stream. Beside you, another legionary has settled onto a flat rock and is also eating his hardtack, his movements identical to yours, the same slow, patient chewing, the same distant gaze that looks at the stream without really seeing it. He has taken off his helmet and set it beside him, and his hair is dark with rain and plastered flat against his skull. He notices you glancing at him and gives a small, tired nod, and you return the nod, and then you both look back at the stream and continue eating. The rain continues to fall, a fine, persistent mist that drifts through the clearing in slow curtains. The pine branches overhead catch much of it, but enough gets through to keep everything wet, and the ground is a dark, saturated brown that reflects the grey sky in shallow puddles. The stream chatters over its stones, and sometimes a small unseen bird calls from the ferns on the far bank, a single high note that cuts through the rain like a thin blade of light, and then dissolves. The air smells of wet pine and wet earth, and the faint, distant scent of cooking smoke, though no one is cooking here. Perhaps a farmstead somewhere beyond the forest, or the memory of a fire that burned days ago. You take another drink from your flask, the water still cold and clean, and then you cork it again and set it beside you on the mossy stone. Your legs feel heavy and tired, the muscles of your calves and thighs slowly relaxing now that you have stopped moving, and a deep, dull ache spreads through your lower back where the pack has been pressing all morning. You lean back against the trunk of the birch tree, feeling the rough, cold bark through your sagum, and you let your eyes unfocus, staring at the stream without looking at any particular thing. The water flows and flows, a constant liquid motion that never changes and never pauses, and watching it is like watching time itself, a smooth, silent current that carries everything forward without effort. A soldier at the far end of the clearing has removed his caligae and is soaking his feet in the stream, his bare legs pale against the dark water. He sits very still, his hands resting on his knees, and his face has an expression of quiet relief, the simple pleasure of cold water on tired skin. Another man is using his whetstone on the blade of his dagger, the soft, rhythmic scrape of stone on iron, adding another layer to the sound of the clearing. No one hurries. The pause will last as long as it lasts, and then the march will resume, and that is the whole of it. You finish the last of your hardtack, brushing the crumbs from your sagum with a slow sweeping gesture, and you wrap the remaining biscuit and meat back in the oiled cloth and return the bundle to your satchel. Your fingers find the small pouch of salt, still dry, and you touch it briefly, a habitual check that it is there. The tin cup rattles softly against the wooden spoon as you close the satchel, a small familiar sound. You stretch your legs out in front of you, your caligae still muddy and wet, and you flex your toes inside the leather straps, feeling the stiffness in the joints, the slight ache in the arches of your feet that has been building since the first mile. The stream flows on, and the rain falls on, and the men rest, and the pause stretches out into a long, quiet space that is neither day nor night, neither marching nor sleeping, just a gentle, suspended stillness in the middle of the wet forest. You close your eyes for a moment and listen to the water, the sound filling your ears and washing out the memory of the squelching mud and the creaking leather. And for a little while you are not a legionary on a march. You are just a person sitting by a stream in the rain, and there is nowhere else to be, and nothing else to do. The moment holds you, and you hold it, and then slowly it begins to loosen. You open your eyes when you hear the centurion's vine stick tap once against a rock, a soft wooden knock that carries across the clearing without urgency. The men around you stir, a slow ripple of motion as boots are put back on, and packs are adjusted, and flasks are corked for the final time. No one groans or complains, the rest is over, and it is time to walk again. You push yourself up from the mossy stone, your legs protesting faintly as they take your weight again, and you walk back to the birch tree where your furka still stands. You lift the pole, settle it onto your shoulder, and feel the familiar pressure return, the weight of your gear pressing down on the same tired spot. The march resumes, your feet squelching in the mud as you rejoin the column, and the stream slides away behind you, its murmur fading into the endless sound of rain and footsteps and the grey, patient afternoon. After the pause by the stream, the march resumes, but it is no longer the same march. The morning had a kind of slow freshness, a gradual waking of the body into its rhythm, whereas the afternoon feels heavier, older, as if the world itself has grown tired of the rain and the mud and the endless trees. Your legs move by habit now, the muscles contracting and releasing without any conscious signal from your mind, and you are aware of your own walking only as a distant, repetitive sensation somewhere below you, a dull, mechanical thudding that is separated from the rest of your awareness. The distance ahead means nothing. You no longer measure it or think about it, having surrendered entirely to the forward motion that will carry you until the light fails and the halt is called. The road dips and curves, following the contour of low hills that rise and fall in long, sweeping undulations under the forest floor. You climb a slope without really feeling the effort, your body leaning into the incline with a slight, automatic adjustment of the hips, and then you descend the other side with a looser, easier stride, the mud squelching a little louder on the downhill because your heels strike first. The drizzle, which had been a fine, steady mist for most of the morning, now thickens briefly into proper rain, a sudden thickening of the air that turns the grey light a shade darker and fills your ears with a low, drumming roar. It hammers on the leaves and needles overhead, and the canopy, overwhelmed, releases a cascade of heavy cold drops that punch into the mud around your feet and slap against your helmet and shoulders. The track becomes a slick mire within 100 paces, the water no longer soaking in, but flowing over the surface, mixing with the clay into a thin, clinging soup that pulls at your caligae with every step, sucking the sandals down so that each lift requires a tiny, additional tug from the muscles along your shins. You feel the pack's weight pressing deeper into your skin now, no longer a simple, familiar pressure, but a distinct ache that has settled into the right side of your lower back and the top of your left shoulder. The leather straps of the furka creak with every stride, a soft, wet, repetitive sound like a small animal complaining, and the pack itself sways just a fraction more than it did in the morning, the bindings having loosened slightly under the constant damp. The shield bumps your elbow with a dull wooden thud that you have long stopped noticing, and the satchel strap has worn a raw line across your collarbone that you will only find tonight when you remove your tunic. This is the hour when the body stops being a friend and becomes a collection of small, persistent grievances, each one demanding a little attention, and you give them that attention without resentment, making the tiny adjustments that experience has taught you, rolling your shoulder forward a finger's width, tightening your stomach muscles to support the lower back, shortening your stride by a fraction to ease the impact on your heels. Water finds the small gap between your sargum and your tunic, a narrow opening just above your belt at the back, and a slow, cold trickle seeps through the wool of your inner garment and begins to spread across the skin of your lower back. The patch of cold grows slowly, creeping outward like a stain, and the contrast between the warmth of your working muscles and the cold of the invading water is sharp enough to make you shiver once. A quick, involuntary shudder that passes from your shoulders to your knees. Then the cold patch warms slightly from your body heat, or perhaps you simply stop noticing it, and the march continues. The column passes through a stretch of forest where the trees are younger and closer together, their trunks no thicker than a man's thigh and their branches interlacing overhead to form a tunnel of deep green shadow. The light here is dimmer, filtered not just by clouds but by layer upon layer of wet leaves, and it has a greenish cast, as if you were walking through the inside of a jade bowl. The rain sounds different in this tunnel, transformed into 1,000 separate noises that rise and fall around you like some vast accidental music. Droplets strike the high, broad leaves of beeches with a flat, hollow slap. They hit the needles of young pines with a fine, hissing patter. They land on the broad fronds of ferns with a soft, shuddering rustle that makes the whole undergrowth tremble. The breeze stirs the higher branches, sending a surge of accumulated water down in a sudden localized shower that drums across your path for a few seconds and then stops, leaving a ringing quiet. There is the sound of your own breathing inside the helmet, the creak of your pack, the squelch of mud, and all around you the constant, gentle bombardment of water on every leaf and twig and stone. A sound so complex and yet so monotonous that it becomes a kind of silence in its own right. Time blurs. You could have been walking for an hour since the stream, or 3, and there would be no way to tell the difference. The grey light never changes, the trees never change, the rain never stops. Your mind has drifted into a state that is not quite waking and not quite sleeping. A kind of open-eyed trance where you are aware of the track ahead and the movement of your body, but also detached from them, watching yourself walk as if from a small distance. Fragments of old memories float up from nowhere. The taste of a particular stew you ate one winter in a Gallic camp, the rough voice of a long-dead centurion teaching you to throw a javelin, the pattern of cracks in the plaster wall of your childhood room. You do not hold on to these memories. They surface like bubbles in a slow stream and then pop, leaving no trace. The march is a river, and you are floating in it, carried forward without effort. Your feet are soaked and cold, the hobnails grinding on the small stones that litter the track where the mud has washed away, and your toes have gone slightly numb inside the leather straps. The sensation is not painful, just remote, as if your feet belong to someone else who is walking ahead of you. The mud changes consistency continually, from the thin, watery sludge of the low places to a stickier, redder clay that clumps on your soles and makes your sandals feel heavy and unbalanced. Every so often you scrape your foot against a root or a rock to clean the worst of it, a small habitual gesture that interrupts the rhythm for only a single step. The column enters a long, straight stretch where the track follows an old ridge line, the ground falling away on both sides into mist-filled hollows where you can see nothing but the tops of tree ferns waving in a slow, wet breeze. The air here is cooler, and the rain has thinned again to a fine, drifting mist that blows almost horizontally across the track, beading on the right side of your body and leaving the left side merely damp. The men ahead of you are dark silhouettes against the pale grey void of the mist, their shapes distorted and softened so that they look less like soldiers and more like moving shadows, their packs and furcae and helmets all blending into a single blocky shape that sways and lurches with every step. You realize that you have been staring at the back of the man ahead for so long that you no longer see him as a person. He is just a pattern of dark wool and wet leather, a landmark that moves at a fixed speed and never changes. Deep fatigue has settled into your bones, a tiredness that goes beyond the ache in your legs and the soreness in your shoulder. It is the kind of tiredness that comes from hours of constant, low-grade effort, an exhaustion that seeps into your mind and slows your thoughts to a crawl. You think about stopping, but you do not stop. You think about the evening camp, the small warmth of the oil lamp and the taste of hot porridge, but the thoughts are vague and colorless, more like impressions than real images. The only real thing is the road, the rain, the weight, the rhythm. The track slopes downward again, and you nearly slip on a patch of slick, exposed clay where the mud has been scoured away by running water, your left foot sliding sideways until the hobnails catch on the stone with a jarring grind. Your heart gives a single, heavy beat, and then you recover and keep walking, the moment of alarm already fading. You glance at the ground more carefully for a while, stepping around the worst of the mire, but after 100 paces, the carefulness fades, and you return to the automatic stride. The column passes a crossroads, a place where a smaller track comes in from the south and merges with the main road, though the cross-track is barely visible under a tangle of wet grass and small thorny shrubs. Some previous unit has left a wooden post here with a crude carving of a boar's head, the wood dark and soft with rot, and the rain has washed the carving so that the boar's eye is a deep, black hollow that holds a tiny pool of water. You notice the post as you pass, and you wonder, in the slow, drifting way that you wonder about things on the march, who carved it and when and how long ago that unit passed this way. You will never know the answer, and the question dissolves before you have finished asking it. The light begins to fade almost imperceptibly. There is no sunset in this weather, no gold or red breaking through the clouds, just a gradual deepening of the grey, a subtle shift from the pale, even light of afternoon to a darker, bluer grey that suggests the day is ending. The mist thickens in the hollows, rising up the slopes like a slow white tide, and the trees become even darker, their trunks black against the silver-white fog. The rain continues, but it seems softer now, less insistent, as if the day is too tired to sustain a heavier fall. Your eyes strain slightly to see the track ahead, and you notice that the men in front of you have become shadows again, their forms blending into the gathering gloom. The rhythm of your footsteps has slowed by a tiny, imperceptible amount, a natural response to the failing light and the deep fatigue in your legs, though no one has given an order to slow down. The whole column seems to be moving through deeper water, the pace settling into something almost dreamlike, a slow, heavy trudge that matches the weight of the day. Your breathing is slow and deep, your breath clouding in front of your face, the mist of your own exhalation mixing with the mist of the rain. And then, without any signal that you can hear or see, the column stops. The man in front of you halts, and you halt, and the man behind you halts, the sequence rippling backward in a soft, muffled wave of footsteps ceasing. You stand still in the mud, your legs trembling faintly with the sudden absence of motion, and you lower your furca to the ground with a heavy, grateful thud. The halt has come at a new patch of level ground, a wide, flat clearing on a gentle slope, already slightly muddy, but with good drainage and a line of old pines to shelter against the north wind. The light is almost gone now, the sky a deep, charcoal grey, and the rain taps softly on your helmet as you look around at the dim shapes of other legionaries doing the same thing, lowering their packs, bending to stretch their backs, beginning the slow, patient work of making camp. The halt settles over the clearing like a deep, slow breath, the last squelch of your caligai fading into the mud as you stop walking and stand still for the first time in hours. The day's march is over. The ground where you have stopped is a wide, flat clearing on a gentle slope, the kind of place that countless armies before yours have used for the same purpose. Its soil already slightly muddy from the rain, but firm enough beneath the surface to hold a tent peg. Tall pines ring the clearing on three sides, their dark shapes barely visible now in the deepening grey, and a line of younger birches marks the eastern edge where the ground drops toward a shallow drainage run. The rain continues to fall, a soft, steady tapping that has been your companion all day and will be your companion all night. But here it seems gentler, more patient, as if it too is tired from the long march. You lower your furka from your shoulder with a slow, deliberate motion, feeling the weight lift from the saw groove in your shoulder and travel down your arm until the butt of the pole sinks into the mud with a soft, wet thud. The relief is immediate and deep, a spreading warmth that flows into the compressed muscle and begins at once to ease the ache. You stand for a moment with your hand resting on the upright pole, your head bowed slightly, your breath coming slow and deep. Around you in the dim grey light of the late afternoon, other legionaries are doing the same thing, their dark forms scattered across the clearing like the standing stones of some ancient circle, each man pausing in his own small space to let the day's burden settle before beginning the work of the evening. The clearing slowly comes alive with small, quiet sounds. A wooden shovel scrapes against the earth as someone begins to cut the first square of turf for a drainage ditch. A bronze pot clinks softly against the iron rim of the pack. A man coughs, a low, muffled sound, and another man answers with a few quiet words that you cannot make out over the rain. The smell of the place is different from the track. Here there is pine resin and wet moss, and the faint, sharp scent of the wild mint that grows in clumps near the drainage run, crushed underfoot by the first men to arrive. The air is cool and clean, and the mist drifts through the clearing in slow, grey ribbons that curl around the tree trunks and dissolve. You unbuckle the leather straps that hold your pack to the furka, your fingers working the wet buckles with the slow, practiced patience of a man who has done this 1,000 times. The leather is slick and reluctant, the bronze tongue swollen slightly with moisture, and you have to pull each strap twice to free it, the wet hide squeaking softly as it slides through the buckle. The pack comes loose, and you lower it to the ground beside the furka, then unhook the rolled tent panel from where it hangs along the side. The panel is heavy with water, the goat hide dark and slick, and it smells strongly of wet animal and the faint woody tang of the smoke that was used to cure it long ago. You set it aside on a patch of pine needles, and then free your shield from its bindings, leaning the heavy, leather-covered oval against the trunk of the nearest birch, where it will stay dry enough until you need it again. Around you the same routine unfolds dozens of times over, a slow, unspoken choreography that has been performed by Roman soldiers on every frontier for hundreds of years. Men sink the iron-shod ends of their fursi into the soft earth, the poles standing upright in a scattered line like a strange, bare forest. Packs are opened and rummaged through, blankets shaken out, cloaks spread over low branches to air out some of the day's damp. No one rushes. There is a deep, quiet satisfaction in these first moments of the camp, the simple animal pleasure of removing weight from tired shoulders and preparing a place to rest. Your tent mates find you in the clearing one by one, the 7 other men of your contubernium drifting together out of the mist with their own panels and poles. The first to arrive is the tall legionary from northern Italy, his broken strap now tied with a length of spare cord that has held for the whole march. He nods at you and drops his panel onto the pine needles beside yours with a heavy, wet slap. Then comes the wiry Gaul from the south, his furka held across both shoulders and his sharp, narrow face pinched with the cold. 2 more arrive together, brothers from a farm in Pickenham who always work side by side without speaking. The last three trickle in over the next few minutes, one of them still chewing a bit of hardtack from the midday pause, and soon the 8 of you are gathered in a loose circle on a patch of level ground that your group has claimed near the center of the clearing. The work begins without any discussion of who will do what, because everyone already knows. 2 men take the fursae and plant them upright as the main support poles, sinking the iron spikes deep into the soft ground and packing the soil around them with firm stamps of muddy caligulae. The poles stand about 8 feet apart, their forks facing upward to receive the ridge pole that will run between them. Another man produces the ridge pole from his own pack, a smooth, straight length of ash that breaks down into 2 pieces for carrying, and he fits the sections together with a soft, hollow clunk, then lifts it into the forks where it settles with a solid, final thud. The frame of the shelter now stands against the grey sky, a simple, elegant structure of wood and rope that has not changed in design since the grandfathers of your grandfathers first marched under the eagles. You and your remaining tent mates unroll the 8-goat-height panels and spread them on the ground, the wet leather gleaming dully in the last of the light. The panels are roughly square, each one about the height of a man, and their edges are studded with wooden toggles and looped leather cords that will join them to their neighbors. The rain continues to fall on the spread panels, but the water beads on the oily hide and runs off in tiny rivulets without soaking through, and you take a moment to wipe away a few pine needles that have stuck to the leather before the panels are lifted. The first panel goes up, raised by 2 men on one side and hooked over the ridgepole so that it hangs down like a dark curtain. The toggles along its top edge slot into loops sewn along the pole, and you work from the center outward, fastening each one with a push and twist that seats the wooden peg securely. The panel hangs straight and heavy, still dripping along its bottom edge, and you move to the next one, overlapping the edges where the toggles and loops meet. The joining is slow and methodical. Each toggle must be pushed through its corresponding loop and then turned sideways so it cannot slip back, and the wet leather makes the fit tight and sometimes stubborn. Your fingers work the pegs with a patient, rhythmic motion, pushing and twisting, the same small movement repeated until the last of the 8 panels is attached and the tent stands complete. A low, sturdy shelter shaped like a long ridge of dark hide that blends into the twilight. Inside, the tent is a long, narrow space that smells of wet goat, damp earth, and the faint, clean scent of pine needles that someone has scattered on the ground to soak up the worst of the moisture. The light is dim, filtering through the seams where the panels join, and the air is still and close, already a few degrees warmer than the air outside because of the heat rising from the earth and the bodies of the men who will sleep here. You crawl inside on your hands and knees, the ground soft and yielding under your palms, and you find your spot along the left wall, the same position you have slept in every night since the cohort assembled. The space is just wide enough for your body and your gear, a small rectangle of privacy that you will share with the snores and rustles of 7 other men. You crawl back out into the rain to finish the work. The tent still needs its drainage ditch, a narrow trench cut around the uphill side to carry rainwater away from the leather walls and prevent the floor from becoming a swamp. You take the small bronze-bladed spade from your pack, its handle worn smooth by years of use, and you kneel in the mud at the upper edge of the tent. The first cut of the blade into the turf is crisp and soft, slicing through the wet grass and the dark, fibrous soil beneath with a sound like tearing cloth. You cut a square of turf about the size of your 2 hands, lifting it out with the spade and setting it aside in a neat stack, and then you cut another, working your way along a straight line that will become a shallow channel about a hand's breadth deep. The soil is wet and heavy, dark brown and threaded with pale roots from the pines, and it clings to the blade so that you have to knock it clean against a stone every few cuts. The work is slow and steady, your back bending and straightening in a gentle rhythm, the rain falling on your shoulders and running down your neck while you dig. Around you, other men are digging their own trenches, the soft, rhythmic scrape of bronze on soil filling the clearing like the sound of some quiet, industrious animal. The channels meet at the corners of the tent and then run off downhill, where the water will spread into the undergrowth and sink into the moss without pooling. When your section of trench is finished, you stand and stretch your back, your spine cracking softly, and you look at the small, tidy channel with a quiet satisfaction. It is a simple thing, a ditch in the mud, but it will keep the tent floor dry through the night, and that is enough. You stack your shield with the others in a neat pile near the tent entrance, the large curved ovals leaning against each other like a row of sleeping turtles, their leather covers beaded with rain. Your furka you unload completely, removing the last small items that still hang from it, and then you join the other furka standing in their row, the forked poles rising from the mud like a stripped-back vineyard waiting for spring. The clearing is now a proper camp, orderly and secure, its shapes arranged in the pattern that every legionary knows by heart. You duck back into the tent, this time bringing your pack and satchel with you, and you settle onto your patch of ground. The pine needles under you are damp but not wet, their sharp, clean scent rising as your weight presses them down, and you arrange your blanket and sagum into a rough pallet that will be your bed. You pull off your caligay, the wet leather straps slipping away from your ankles and calves with a soft, reluctant peeling, and you set them aside near the tent wall where they will dry a little overnight. Your feet are pale and wrinkled from the long day of wet marching, the skin soft and waterlogged, and you rub them slowly with your hands, feeling the chill and the deep, dull ache in the arches and heels. The air on your bare feet is cool, and a small draught from the tent flap carries the smell of rain and pine. You remove your helmet last, lifting the heavy bronze bowl from your head with both hands and setting it on the ground beside your blanket. The padded liner is damp from sweat and rain, and the metal exterior is filmed with a thin layer of moisture that catches the faint grey light from the tent seams. The relief of the weight leaving your head is a small, quiet pleasure, and you roll your neck slowly from side to side, feeling the muscles stretch and release. Your hair is wet and plastered to your skull, and you run your fingers through it, working out a few tangles with patient, gentle pulls. Outside, the rain continues to tap on the leather roof, a sound that is no longer the harsh, insistent drumming of the afternoon, but a softer, more rhythmic patter, like 1,000 gentle fingers drumming on a distant table. Now and then, a heavier drop, collected from a pine branch, hits the tent with a louder, hollow slap that echoes slightly in the small space. Inside, the other men are doing the same things you are doing, unrolling blankets, removing sandals, stretching tired legs, murmuring a few quiet words to each other about the day's march and the state of the road and the likely weather for tomorrow. The talk is low and slow, without urgency, the kind of talk that fades naturally into silence as each man settles into his own small patch of ground. One of the brothers from Picenum has lit the small clay oil lamp, and the tiny flame dances inside its bronze cage, casting soft, wavering shadows on the leather walls. The light is warm and golden, a single, small point of brightness in the dim, grey world, and it makes the tent feel like a separate universe, a small, safe bubble of warmth and human presence set apart from the cold, wet forest outside. The smell of the burning oil is faint and slightly bitter, mixing with the smells of wet wool, damp earth, and the clean, sharp pine. You watch the flame for a while, your eyes following its gentle, swaying dance, and the tension of the long march slowly seeps out of your muscles and into the ground below. You dig into your pack and find your spare tunic, a dry, rough linen garment that you keep rolled at the very bottom, protected from the rain by layers of leather and wool. You pull off your wet tunic, the fabric clinging to your skin and then releasing with a cold, clammy peel, and you pull the dry one over your head, the linen harsh against your damp skin at first, and then warming quickly from your body heat. The simple act of changing into dry cloth is one of the deepest comforts of the day, a small renewal that signals the transition from marching to resting, from the long wet road to the small dry tent. You fold your wet tunic and set it aside to dry a little, though you know it will still be damp in the morning, and you wrap your sagum around your shoulders like a shawl. The last of the daylight has faded completely now, and outside the tent the world is a deep, wet darkness, the trees invisible, the sky a solid blanket of cloud. The rain continues its soft, patient rhythm, and the air inside the tent has grown warmer from the combined heat of 8 resting bodies. You lie down on your blanket and pull the sagum over you, feeling your legs slowly relax into the uneven ground, the pine needles shifting under you until they find a shape that fits your body. The dull ache in your feet and shoulders and back is still there, but it is no longer a discomfort. It is a deep, heavy feeling that tells you the day was long and the work was real. A feeling that will carry you into sleep as gently as the rain carries the forest into night. You listen to the rain on the leather roof, the soft, endless hush that has been your companion since before dawn, and you watch the dim golden glow of the lamp as it flickers against the tent walls. The men around you have fallen silent, their breathing slow and even, and you feel a quiet, wordless connection to them, the bond of shared effort and shared rest. The day is over. The march is done. There is only the rain, the dark, and the slow, steady drift towards sleep. Inside the tent, the air is close and still, heavy with the smell of wet goat hide and damp wool, and the earthy, mushroom scent of the forest floor that has been tramped in on a dozen pairs of muddy caligae. You sit cross-legged on your unfolded blanket, your back resting against the leather panel that forms the rear wall, and you feel the day's deep tiredness settling into your legs like a weight that grows heavier now that you have stopped moving. The pain in your lower back and the soreness in your shoulder have faded into a single diffuse ache that spreads through your whole body, a sensation that is uncomfortable and also strangely satisfying, proof that the march is over and you have arrived at the place where you will rest. The rain has softened to a gentle, constant pattering on the tent roof, a sound that now seemed less like weather and more like a lullaby. The tent is small and low, the 8 leather panels buttoned together with wooden toggles to form a squat rectangle just tall enough to sit in. The walls slope inward slightly, and the floor is bare earth, already packed down by the weight of the men who have been in here before, smelling of old wood smoke and the faint sharp tang of spilled vinegar from some long-ago meal. Your companions are arranged around the center of the tent, their shapes dim in the faint light of a single bronze oil lamp that sits on a flat stone in the middle of the floor. The lamp is a simple bowl with a pinched lip that holds a wick twisted from old linen threads, and the flame it produces is small and yellow, flickering slightly with unseen drafts, casting soft, wavering shadows on the leather walls. The shadows move slowly, stretching and shrinking, a quiet, hypnotic dance. One of your tent mates, the wiry soldier from southern Gaul, is kneeling by a tiny clay stove that he has set up on a flat stone to protect the ground from the heat. The stove is no larger than a loaf of bread, a simple cylinder with a grate at the bottom and a hole at the top that glows orange when the fire is lit. He feeds it with small twigs and dried pine needles that he gathered during the last stretch of the march and kept dry inside his satchel, and the fire crackles softly, a gentle, busy sound that fills the tent with the clean, sharp scent of burning resin. The heat from the stove is small but immediate, a warm pressure on your face and hands that you can feel from across the tent. A welcome change from the cold, wet world outside. You lean forward slightly, holding your hands out toward the warmth, and your fingers slowly stop being stiff and become limber again. The soldier at the stove pours a measured amount of wheat grain from a small leather sack into a bronze pot, the grains falling in a pale, dusty stream that rattles faintly against the metal. He then adds water from his leather flask, pouring it in slowly, and the water turns milky as it mixes with the grain. The pot is set on the clay stove, and within a few moments you hear the water begin to stir, a faint, liquid murmur that grows into a steady, bubbling simmer. The sound of the porridge cooking is a low, peaceful noise, a series of soft plops and gurgles that blends with the pattering rain and the crackling twigs, and the smell that rises from the pot is warm and earthy, like fresh bread and wet grass, and the faint, nutty sweetness of the wheat. You watch the steam rise from the pot in thin, curling wisps that catch the lamplight and glow like pale silk, and the steam fills the tent with a gentle, moist heat that makes the air feel thicker and softer. Your stomach, which had been a hollow, distant ache all afternoon, now tightens with a sharper hunger, and you become aware of the exact taste of your own mouth, plain and empty, and ready for food. You reach down to your satchel and pull out your tin cup, a simple vessel with a slightly dented rim and a handle that has been worn smooth by thousands of meals, and you place it on your knee, ready for when the porridge is done. The man tending the pot stirs it slowly with a long wooden spoon that he has carved from a birch branch, the bowl of the spoon scraping softly against the bottom of the pot, with a gentle rhythmic sound, like a small stone turning in a stream. The porridge thickens as it cooks, the bubbles becoming slower and heavier, and the color deepens from a pale, watery white to a creamy golden brown. He adds a few pinches of salt from the shared pouch, the white crystals falling into the pot and vanishing instantly, and the smell becomes slightly sharper, more savory. No one speaks while this happens. The only sounds are the simmering porridge, the crackling fire, and the endless rain on the leather above. You glance around the tent at the other men. The tall legionary with the broken strap, now mended with a spare leather lace, sits with his back against his pack and his eyes half closed, his face slack with a tiredness that goes beyond the muscles and into the bones. He is holding his own tin cup loosely in one hand, and the cup rests on his thigh, already waiting. Another soldier, a quiet man from a mountain village who rarely speaks, is unrolling his spare tunic and folding it into a pillow for the night. His movements slow and unhurried, the tunic soft and faded from many washings. The soldier at the stove is focused entirely on the porridge, his face lit from below by the orange glow of the fire, his expression calm and absorbed. This is the hour of the day when nothing is required but to sit and wait and let the warmth seep in. When the porridge is ready, the soldier at the stove lifts the pot from the fire with a folded piece of leather to protect his hand, and he sets it on the flat stone in the center of the tent. The porridge steams heavily, a thick, bubbling mass that smells of grain and salt and the faint hint of the pine twigs that cooked it. He serves the meal with the same wooden spoon, scooping a generous portion into each tin cup that is held out in turn. The first man served is the oldest legionary in the group, a soldier with grey in his beard and deep lines around his eyes, a tradition that no one questions. Then the others in no particular order, their cups filling with the hot, dense porridge, and finally you hold out your own cup and feel the weight of the food settle into it, the warmth spreading through the metal and into your cold fingers. You hold the cup in both hands, feeling the heat on your palms, and you bring it close to your face so the steam rises up and moistens your cheeks and nose. The porridge is thick enough that your wooden spoon stands up in it, and when you take the first spoonful, it fills your mouth with a soft, creamy warmth that has little flavor beyond the basic clean taste of boiled grain and salt. Yet it is one of the best things you have ever eaten, because you are tired and cold and the warmth goes down your throat and spreads into your chest and belly like a small gentle down your throat and spreads into your chest and belly like a small gentle sun. You eat slowly, spooning the porridge in small, careful bites, chewing even though it is soft enough to swallow without chewing, because eating slowly makes the meal last longer. Between mouthfuls, you hold the cup against your chest, feeling the warmth radiating through your tunic, and you listen to the sounds of the tent, the soft clink of tin spoons against tin cups, the quiet, satisfied sighs of men eating, the faint hiss of the dying fire in the clay stove as the last twigs burn down to ash. The lamp flickers, and a drop of rain finds a seam in the leather and falls onto the ground near your knee with a tiny dark splat, but you pay it no attention. The tall legionary produces a small piece of salty cheese wrapped in a clean cloth, a treat he has been saving for a particularly wet day, and he passes it around without a word. Each man breaks off a tiny corner with his fingers and adds it to the last of his porridge, and the cheese melts slightly from the heat, releasing a sharp, tangy flavor that cuts through the blandness of the grain. You eat your piece slowly, letting it dissolve on your tongue, and you feel a quiet, wordless gratitude for this small gift, a warmth that has nothing to do with the food itself. When the meal is finished, the cups are scraped clean with wooden spoons and wiped with scraps of cloth or the tails of tunics, and they are returned to satchels with a soft clink. The bronze pot is taken outside for a moment, and you hear the sound of rain splashing into it as it is rinsed, and then it is brought back in and set aside to dry. The clay stove is allowed to cool, its warmth still radiating through the tent for a little while. No one suggests another fire. The lamp is enough, and soon even that will be extinguished, so the tent can fall into darkness and sleep. You shift your position, stretching your legs out in front of you and wiggling your toes inside your still damp caligae, feeling the ache in your arches and the slight sting of a blister forming on your heel, a small hot spot that you will need to tend to in the morning. Your body feels heavy now, not just tired, but deeply, thoroughly worn, and the warmth of the meal in your stomach has spread outward into your limbs, making them feel slow and thick. You lean your head back against the leather panel and close your eyes. And for a moment, you simply drift, not sleeping, not thinking, just floating in the quiet space between the meal and the night. One of your tent mates begins to hum a tune under his breath. a slow, melodic song from the northern hills that sounds like the wind moving through dry grass. It is a simple melody, no more than 5 or 6 notes that repeat in a gentle cycle, and it rises and falls so softly that you can scarcely hear it over the rain. The humming continues for a while, a quiet, human sound that weaves into the pattering rain in the creaking leather, and then it fades as the man himself drifts towards sleep and the tent becomes silent. You open your eyes and look at the lamp, watching the small flame dance on its wick, the light catching on the bronze walls of the bowl and reflecting upward in a warm, golden glow. The oil is running low, and the flame has begun to gutter slightly, flickering in a pattern that makes the shadows leap. Soon, someone will put it out, and the tent will become dark, and the last trace of the day will be gone. You feel a small, quiet regret at the thought of the darkness, but it is a regret softened by the knowledge that darkness means sleep, and sleep is the only thing you truly want now. The centurion's voice can be heard briefly outside the tent, a low, calm murmur as he speaks with the optio about the watch rotation, though no one inside this tent is on the first watch. You hear the words all quiet, and rain continuing, and then the voices move away, swallowed by the forest. The camp settles into itself, and the night deepens. You unlace your caligae slowly, pulling the wet leather straps loose and setting the sandals aside near the tent wall, where they will dry a little in what remains of the lamp's warmth. Your bare feet are white and wrinkled from being wet all day, and you rub them gently, pressing your thumbs into the arches to ease the ache, a simple, methodical motion that loosens the tight muscles. Then you lie back on your blanket, pulling the heavy sagum over your body as an extra cover, and you feel the straw pallet shift under you, the stalks rustling as they settle into a new shape around your weight. The lamp is extinguished by the last man to lie down, a quick puff of breath that leaves a thin trail of smoke curling up toward the leather roof, and then the tent becomes a dark, quiet cave filled with the breathing of tired men and the endless, gentle drumming of the rain. You close your eyes and let the darkness wrap around you, and the last thing you feel before sleep begins to pull you under is the simple, calm fullness of a meal eaten among companions, the warmth lingering in your belly, and the soft, relentless music of a rainy night in the forest. The lamp is the last thing to go. One of the brothers from Pickenham, the younger of the two, leans over from his blanket and pinches the wick between his thumb and forefinger, a quick, practiced motion that leaves a faint wisp of smoke curling upward into the dark. The small bronze cage that held the flame fades from gold to orange to deep copper, and then there is only the darkness, a complete and total darkness that presses against your open eyes like a soft, heavy cloth. Inside the tent, the air settles into stillness, stirred only by the slow breathing of 8 tired men and the occasional rustle of a blanket pulled tighter against the chill. The rain, which has been your companion through every moment of the day, continues its steady, patient work on the leather roof overhead, a sound so constant and so gentle that it has become indistinguishable from silence itself. You lie on your back with your sagum pulled up to your chin and your blanket spread beneath you, the pine needles under the blanket shifting with a soft, dry crackle whenever you adjust your position. The ground is uneven, a low hump of earth pressing against your left hip, and a shallow hollow where your right shoulder fits as if the soil shaped itself for you alone. The weight of the day has settled deep into your bones, a heavy, spreading fatigue that fills your legs and your back and your shoulders with a dull, warm ache that is not painful so much as profound, the kind of tiredness that comes only after a long march through rain and mud. You feel it in every muscle as you lie still, a slow sinking sensation as your body gives in to gravity and the ground and the deep, inexorable pull of rest. The tent is dark, but not silent, alive with the small, intimate sounds of 8 men settling into sleep. To your left, the wiry Gaul from the south has already begun to snore, a low, rhythmic rumble that rises and falls like a distant wave on a pebble shore, never loud enough to disturb, but always present, a deep, furry undercurrent that weaves itself into the texture of the night. Someone else murmurs in his sleep, a few indistinct syllables that might be words or might be only breath shaped by a dream, and then falls quiet again. A blanket rustles as a man turns onto his side, the wall scraping against the straw and pine needles with a soft swishing sound like wind through dry grass, and then that too fades into the general quiet. The air inside the tent is cool and close, smelling of wet wool and damp earth, and the faint, clean sharpness of pine, along with the deeper, muskier smell of 8 men who have marched all day through the rain and have not washed except in a cold stream. It is not an unpleasant smell, only a human smell, familiar and grounding. You shift slowly under your sargum, finding the exact position where the ground seems to accept the shape of your body, where the hump of earth no longer presses against your hip and your shoulder settles into the hollow like a stone into its socket. The wool of the blanket is rough against your cheek, and the sargum is heavy and warm, holding the heat of your body close while the damp night air cools the tip of your nose and the skin of your forehead. The contrast between the warmth under the cloak and the coolness on your face is a small, quiet pleasure, one of those tiny sensations that you notice only when everything else has fallen away. Your breathing has slowed without your noticing, settling into a long, deep rhythm that matches the slow, rolling pace of the march you walked all day, as if your lungs are still keeping time with your feet, even though your legs are still. Outside, the night rain has steadied into a soft, unbroken hush, a sound like millions of tiny fingers drumming on a leather roof. It falls not in gusts or squalls, but in a continuous, even rhythm, each drop indistinguishable from the next, the whole merging into a single, seamless curtain of sound that fills the world. Sometimes the rain taps on the tent with a light, pattering touch, and sometimes it deepens into a heavier, steadier drumming. But the changes are slow and gentle, so gradual that you lose track of whether the rain is getting heavier or lighter, whether it has been drumming for minutes or hours. A drop collects on a pine branch overhead and falls onto the tent with a louder, hollow thump that echoes slightly in the small space, a sound that comes once and then again, at long, irregular intervals, a slow, accidental metronome marking the passage of the night. Beyond the tent walls, the camp has settled into silence, the deep, collective silence of 100 tired men who have nothing left to do but sleep. Somewhere far off, at the edge of the clearing, a sentry walks his slow, measured beat, his footsteps squelching softly in the mud, the sound coming closer and then fading, closer and then fading, a steady, repeating pattern that is as regular as the rain itself. The sentry does not call out, because there is nothing to call about. The forest around the camp is dark and wet and empty, and the only enemies are the cold and the damp, which cannot be fought with a javelin. You hear his footsteps pass, and then pass again, and the sound is a comfort, a quiet reminder that the world is still turning and the watch is being kept, though you are not required to keep it. Your own watch, if you had one, is not tonight. You know this without having to think about it, the roster of duties so ingrained in the rhythm of the contubernium that your body knows when it is time to sleep and when it is time to rise. Tonight is a night for sleep, a full, unbroken stretch of darkness that will last until the grey light returns and the centurion's vine stick taps against the tent post. So you let yourself sink deeper into the blanket, feeling the tension in your neck release a little more, the tiredness in your lower back loosening its grip, the ache in your feet fading to a distant, pulsing throb. The rain finds a new rhythm, a softer, more muffled patter as the mist thickens outside and the drops grow smaller and more numerous, until the sound is less like drumming and more like a gentle, continuous shushing, the sound of the mother hushing a child, or the sea hushing a shore, or the wind hushing through a field of dry grain. Each drop now is so fine that it barely makes a sound on its own, but together they create a vast, soft whisper that seems to come from everywhere at once, from the sky and the trees and the ground and the air itself. The whisper fills your ears and your mind, washing away the last fragments of thought, the last small memories of the day, the squelch of mud, the weight of the pack, the cold water of the stream, the taste of hardtack, the endless dripping trees. You turn onto your side and pull your knees up slightly, your body curling into the shape it takes every night when sleep is close. The sagum shifts with you, settling over your shoulder and hip, and you tuck one hand under the folded cloth that serves as a pillow, feeling the rough wool against the back of your hand. Your eyes are closed now, though you did not consciously decide to close them, and the darkness behind your eyelids is deep and warm, a darkness that has texture and depth, like the darkness inside a deep cave or under the thickest pine canopy on a moonless night. You breathe in and out, and each breath is a little slower and a little shallower than the one before. Somewhere in the tent, a man shifts on his blanket and sighs, a long, soft exhalation that seems to carry the last weight of the day out of his body. Another man answers with a sigh of his own, and then there is a moment of shared, companionable silence, the silence of men who have walked together through rain and mud and will walk together again tomorrow, who need no words because the work itself is the bond. The silence stretches out, and the breathing in the tent smooths into a single shared rhythm, 8 men breathing in and out at slightly different times, but all within the same slow, sleepy tempo, like 8 instruments playing the same quiet note. The rain continues to fall through the dark forest, falling on the leather tents and the stacked shields, and the upright furcae, falling on the muddy track and the deep, clear streams and the endless, patient trees. It falls on the brown puddles and the wet stones and the soft green moss, and it runs in tiny rivulets down the bark of the pines and gathers in the hollows of fallen logs and drips from the tips of fern fronds. The whole forest is drinking the rain, absorbing it into the soil and the roots and the deep underground streams that flow slowly through the dark places beneath the earth. Nothing is dry, and nothing needs to be dry. The wet is the natural state of things, the way the world has been since the beginning, and will be until the end. A small distant sound reaches your ears, so faint that you might have imagined it, the call of an owl, low and soft. 3 long notes that drift through the rain and then dissolve. The call does not repeat, and the forest returns to its deep, wet silence, the silence of rain and darkness and slow growing things. You picture the owl in your drifting mind, a dark shape perched on a high branch, its feathers fluffed against the wet, its yellow eyes half closed, watching the rain fall through the trees with the same patient, wordless acceptance that you feel in your own bones. Your thoughts have become loose and scattered, no longer connected to each other in any logical chain. You think of the stream where you rested at midday, that was a long time ago, and the water running over the smooth stones, and the way the hardtack tasted faintly of wheat and salt. You think of the scarred pine tree with the resin oozing from its wound, bright as honey in the grey light. You think of the wooden post at the crossroads, with the boar carved into it, the dark pool of water where the eye should be. The images drift through your mind like leaves on a slow current, and you do not hold on to them or push them away. You simply watch them come and go. The warmth under your sagum deepens, spreading from your chest and belly outward to your arms and legs, and the coolness on your face is just enough to keep you from being too warm, a perfect, delicate balance that makes you feel as if you are floating. The ground under you has become softer, or perhaps you have simply stopped noticing its hardness. Your body has melted into the earth, and the earth has accepted you, and the boundary between skin and soil has blurred into something comfortable and indistinct. Your breathing is so slow and so light now that the wool of the blanket barely moves over your chest. The rain continues its soft, eternal shushing, and the sentry's footsteps fade into the distance and do not return, and the snoring of the Gaul becomes a steady, gentle drone that merges with the rain into a single, seamless background. The tent is a small dark cave in a vast wet forest, and you're a small warm presence inside it, one of 8 small warm presences, all of them breathing and resting and drifting through their own private gentle dreams. The world outside does not matter, the march tomorrow does not matter, only the warmth and the darkness and the slow steady rhythm of the rain matter. You feel yourself sinking now, a slow pleasant descent into deeper waters. The last shred of awareness, the small quiet voice that has been narrating your own experience, begins to fade. You are no longer thinking about the rain, or the tent, or the other men, or the march. You are simply present, a body at rest, a mind at peace, a breath moving in and out like the tide. The darkness behind your eyes is no longer empty, but full of warmth and weight and the deep, ancient comfort of sleep. The rain falls on the leather roof, and you do not hear it. The sentry passes again in the mud, and you do not hear him. The owl calls once more from its high branch, and you do not hear it. Your breathing has become so slow and so deep that it is barely more than a gentle, barely perceptible rise and fall under the dark wool. Your face is calm, your hands are still, your feet are warm and heavy under the blanket. Down in the mud outside, the puddles are slowly spreading, joining together into larger and larger pools that reflect nothing because there is no light to reflect. Only the deep, unbroken darkness of a forest night in Germania. The pines drip and the moss drinks and the streams run full and cold through their narrow channels. The camp is a dark cluster of shapes huddled against the rain, the tents pitched in their orderly rows, the ditch dug clean, the shields stacked, and nothing moves except the sentry on his slow, patient beat, and the water running in its endless course down from the sky and through the earth and into the waiting rivers. Inside the tent, the small bronze lamp has long since cooled, and the faint odor of its smoke has blended with the smell of wet wool and damp earth and sleeping men. The leather walls have darkened even further with the hours of rain, and a few beads of condensation have formed on the inside, catching no light, sending no gleam. The men lie in their rows, some on their backs and some on their sides, and some curled into the small, tight shapes they learned as children, and all of them are far away in the private worlds of sleep. One of them dreams of a farm in the hills of Picenum, the dry, golden fields of summer, and the sound of sheep bells in the distance. Another dreams of nothing at all, only a deep, wordless darkness. And you dream of the rain, the same rain that falls outside, except in your dream it is not cold but warm. A gentle, warm rain that falls on a green field and soaks into the soil without a sound. The night stretches on, and the rain does not stop, and the dawn is still hours away, a faint, grey promise hidden somewhere behind the thick layers of cloud. The forest waits, and the camp waits, and the men sleep. There is no alarm, no trumpet call, no sudden noise to break the spell. The world is quiet, and you are sleeping, and that is all that is needed. The deep, slow hours of the night pass like a single quiet breath, and you drift through them without knowing, without stirring, without any awareness of time or place or self, held safe in the dark, warm cradle of rest while the rain falls gently, endlessly, on the leather roof above.